Welcome everybody to another episode of the SRU podcast with me and my guy Will Royal. How you doing today, Will?
Feeling pretty good. These were kind of slower games we saw this week. We picked the same game, so it's not like any of us made a difference in our pick'ems.
Yeah.
I actually won my office pool, which was nice.
Hey, we love to hear that. Taking dubs.
Dubs only.
Yeah. Um, unless you're picking Tennessee versus Alabama. But let's bro, why you make that face?
We'll talk about that after we're done recording.
So, there's a new week in college football, and what we've been waiting for. It was week 9, and with week 9 there comes college football playoff polls. So, Will, I know you want to take us off with that.
Yep. AP poll, you're no longer relevant for the rest of the year. The playoff poll is here, and oh boy, do I have a lot to talk about. You should have seen my face when I found out that Tennessee, yes, Tennessee, the team I have mocked about for years and years, is the new number one team in the country.
Who would have thought?
Year one, Ohio State, which I think should be one, is at 2, followed by Georgia and Clemson. Obviously, we're gonna have a matchup of Tennessee and Georgia this weekend, and one of these teams is gonna fall out. Knock on wood, it's Tennessee.
Maybe, honestly, if one of these teams loses, none of them will fall out. I feel like Georgia could just fall at 4. But yeah,
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. The 4 teams on the outside kind of looking in. Michigan at 5, Bama at 6, TCU at 7, and Oregon at 8. The rest of the playoff poll kind of standard. Tennessee is surprising me because they were 15 in the AP poll, but they're now 10 in the playoff poll. Excuse me.
talking about LSU.
Yeah, that's what I said, didn't I?
No, you said Tennessee.
I wish it was Tennessee.
Rent free, Will. They're living in your head, rent free.
LSU is the number 10 team in the country, and they face number 6 Alabama. We'll talk about that. We do our pick'ems on Thursday. This is kind of surprising me looking at this poll is that there's not one but 2 Group of 5 teams in this playoff poll, and that is number 19 Tulane, who I think is going to end up making a New Year's Six bowl, and number 25 UCF. The one difference between this AP poll or this playoff poll and the AP poll is this that the playoff poll has can I speak today? The playoff poll has Texas in at right at 24, while the AP poll has Liberty sitting right at 23, which, make of that as you will. Hugh Freeze, he's got a big test this weekend with Arkansas, so
Yes, sir.
well, for all we know, he could end up making the playoff poll next week.
No, he won't.
But we had 6 games to talk about that we picked from our pick'ems this last week, and
I'll start the first one.
yeah,
So the first one we had now number 2 Ohio State play against number 13 Penn State. Ohio State won 44-31, and it was a pretty close game at the beginning. CJ Stroud went 26 for 33, 354 yards with 1 touchdown. It's kind of surprising because once you think CJ Stroud and Ohio State, you think he would have more touchdowns in the air, and well, more touchdowns, period. But it wasn't that. Their running back had 2 touchdowns and with 78 yards. His name is Trayvon Henderson, and it looked like at the beginning Ohio State was struggling mightily with Penn State. And they, towards the end, the fourth quarter, they took off. Sean Clifford went 32 for 47, which is kind of odd seeing Sean Clifford throw the ball more than C.J. Stroud. Sean Clifford's more of a dual threat with 371 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. I think the 3 interceptions really helped Ohio State from losing this game. Sean Clifford had more yards than C.J. Stroud, which is kind of crazy. I think this game probably put Hendon Hooker number one in the Heisman race, even though CJ Stroud did have 354 yards. But once you show weakness, the Heisman voters, they start to back off for you a little bit. But I wouldn't say this is the end for CJ Stroud. But if he plays like he's been playing all year and beats Michigan, I feel like he could be a lock for the Heisman, depending on if Tennessee loses this week. Will, how did you feel about this game?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on this. Like early on, Penn State looked like they had like a nice-ish lead going into the fourth quarter, and then from there it was just over. But Ohio State to me is the number one team in the country just because they've been able to have a higher point differential with their opponents. They're making it easier. It's kind of like we've seen with Alabama in years past. So, I mean, I get why they put in Tennessee up there because they have better quality wins because Ohio State really hasn't played that much outside of Penn State and a few other teams. But I think going forward, CJ Stroud is still a top Heisman contender. I think he's going to come down to him or Hendon Hooker, but we'll talk about that when we get closer. Penn State, I kind of expected them to lose. As I mentioned, time and time again, James Franklin is now 1 for 8 against Ohio State in his tenure at Penn State. So it was something I kind of expected.
Yeah,
But
honestly, I probably would have put Ohio State at 1. I see why they put them at 2, but 1 and 2 is interchangeable to me. Georgia, they've had some hiccups type games, so I can see them being at 3. But yeah, 1 and 2 is interchangeable. We had a blowout this week from a game we didn't expect.
yeah, absolutely. We went to this game thinking that the higher ranked team was going to win pretty handily. It's Big 12. It's kind of cut and dry, but oh boy, we were wrong. Kansas State, a team that was, I think, like an 8 or 9 point underdog. Oh, no, they were favorites by like 1.5 points. Yeah, they just blew up Oklahoma State 48-0.
Yeah.
Will Howard is it for Kansas State. I think it's pretty safe to say on that.
Yeah, for sure.
They did look a little shaky with Adrian Martinez, but with him being out, Will Howard came in and he went off. 300 yards with 4 touchdowns compared to Spencer Sanders, who had 150 and an interception. They even brought in, I want to say this can't be Mike Gundy's son I'm looking at, but Gunnar Gundy. That is not a name I'm making up. Yeah, he also threw an interception at the end of the game. But oh my God. Kansas State, I believe, is now sitting at 13 in the playoff poll. Second best Big 12 team behind TCU. And Kansas State, I think, is a team that is going to probably make that push for New Year's Six. Well, I think that a game like this is definitely very much considerable, but wow, Kansas State is good with Will Howard, and Deuce Vaughn's still putting up good numbers as well, having about 160 yards and a touchdown. But Oklahoma State, they need to rebound fast. I think that's like the one takeaway I can get out of this.
Yeah, I feel like ever since the TCU loss, they hadn't really looked good. I feel like it probably took away their confidence. Spencer Sanders had a game that no one would have thought he would have, especially with the Oklahoma State offense. And Will Howard looks like whenever Adrian Martinez come back, they're either gonna have a mini quarterback battle or the coach is gonna have to pick one. I was watching College Game Day, and well, Stephen A. Smith doesn't really watch college football, but he had a point. It's hard to pick a team who's having quarterback problems, but Kansas State really did show us that it doesn't matter. Their number 2 quarterback is ready to play and ready to win big games. But overall, this game was lackluster. What a 48-0 game would be. Honestly, I'm surprised we even put this game on the review. But since we talked about it and it was one of our games of the week last week, we did. Sometimes we don't. But this next game will it's a team that you might be in love with.
No, absolutely not. This was a game that I wanted this team to lose so badly, but they proved me that I can be so wrong in many ways. And you take over on this.
Oh, you want me to take over? Yeah, number 3 Tennessee played number 19 Kentucky last week or this weekend, and Tennessee put a beat down on them, winning 44-6. Hendon Hooker is looking like the Heisman favorite. Everyone thinks he is. I think like he's a little underrated. Well, to new media, I would say a lot of people have him rated under Will Levis going into this game. But he went 19 for 25 for 245 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown. Well, 3 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown to Will Levis's 98 yards, 16 for 27, and 3 interceptions. That is ridiculous. Will Levis at the beginning of the year was looked at as a quarterback who would probably go first round, probably the first 2 quarterbacks taken in the draft. And I feel like his stock is drastically fallen. We need to, Will, me and you have to look at the Mel Kiper draft board into this season so far.
Yeah.
Other than that, Chris Rodriguez had 64 yards and a touchdown for Kentucky. They had their only touchdown, and I'm guessing they went for two, either went for two or missed a field goal. I'm not 100% sure on that.
I think it was 2 field goals.
They missed 2 field goals, even
Oh no, it was a touch. Yeah, it was a touchdown, but Tennessee
yeah,
blocked
he
it.
missed the extra point. Yeah, he missed the extra point. I just
Yeah.
saw it. And from the Tennessee standpoint, Jalen Hyatt had another great game. He's looking like he could be the Biletnikoff winner this year. He had 138 yards for 2 touchdowns with a 55-yard reception. Tennessee is looking like that team, and they were looking real scary. And even though I did pick Tennessee and I tease Will about Tennessee, I hate Tennessee. Yeah, I'll let that not be unsaid. I do not like Tennessee, and if they win the national championship, I don't know what I would do. I just I actually don't want to think about it. I really kind of hope they lose this week, but I don't know if I'm not picking them. I actually might pick them this week just because Georgia's offense doesn't look the best, and it from this week, it looked like their offense was Brock Bowers, and I can't really say much about that because they did just lose their best defensive player in Nolan Smith. Well, I know you would love to talk about this game.
I mean, not really, because it's Tennessee winning and Tennessee winning very justifiably. Just take a guess at what Will Levis's QBR was.
Let me guess. I'm gonna say 2.
No, you're not that far off. It was 16.
Yeah, I just saw that. That's bad, man.
And this is a quarterback we're talking about going in the first round, possibly to the Washington Commanders. What I last saw, that's the commies. But tennis, like you're right. Jalen Hyatt is making a statement for Ncaa. We both said it was going to come down to. I said Jackson Smith-Njigba, but he's been injured most of this season.
I said Jordan Addison, who's got injured earlier, like a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So this Tennessee team, their biggest test. We said Alabama was their biggest test, but it's really going to come down to Georgia. This is basically what we're looking at is the SEC East championship at that 2:30 kickoff on Saturday. Winner of this game is going to go to Atlanta because none of these they're not going to lose the rest of their schedule unless by some miracle Georgia Tech beats Georgia.
And Vanderbilt beats Tennessee.
Yeah, they're talking about. They're talking about doing a checkerboard at Vanderbilt Stadium.
Yeah.
But this I'm gonna go more in depth with my decision on why I think Georgia's gonna beat Tennessee. But as of now, this game just it pains to look at. So let's move on before it gets worse for my mental health.
Before we move on, me and you were talking about beginning of the season. This game could decide who wins the SEC East because we had both Kentucky and Tennessee having a probability of upsetting Georgia. But yeah, we can move on to the next one, which is very controversial in the college football world.
Yeah. Rivalry games, they're fun and until they're not. In this case, Michigan State at the Big House. Michigan won pretty handily, a 29-7 win over their quote unquote little brother and from East Lansing. This is the Michigan State team that is just disappointed us all year. Like we had high hopes for them, and especially with Peyton Thorne, but it just proved that Kenneth Walker was the reason that this team held itself together. But that doesn't matter because at the end of the game, some violence took place in the tunnel. I think it was 4 Michigan State players jumped 1 or 2 Michigan players, one of which like broke his nose and is now looking for possible pressing charges. Mel Tucker came forward saying these players are suspended indefinitely. I'm honestly surprised they didn't just get kicked off the team for something like that.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh said it was just a horrible act, and I couldn't agree more. But enough, rivalries. What do you expect?
Um, I don't expect this.
Yeah, like in all my years of seeing, Alabama, Auburn, Ohio State, Michigan, these high-profile rivalries, I've never seen really something like this.
Let's not talk about when an Alabama fan poisoned a historic
Oh,
series.
I can go off on that. Harvey Updike. I mean, he's dead now, but
Wait, the guy died?
yeah, he died from COVID like 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Harvey Updike died. And that's basically the reason why Paul Feinbaum is famous now because of that whole thing. But back to the game, Michigan, I think is, it's going to come down to Ohio State to see if they can get in the playoffs, let alone the Big Ten championship. And JJ McCarthy still put on a pretty good game. He didn't have as good of a game as Peyton Thorne did. Peyton Thorne threw for over 200. McCarthy was just under 200. But for me, at least, it comes down to Blake Corum being that whole offense right there. He had 177 yards and a touchdown, and he's basically the best running back in the country.
Yeah.
He will have him as high as 2 or 3 in their Heisman rankings, and there's a good reason why. He's unstoppable.
Yeah.
And I think going forward with Michigan, it's going to come when they play Ohio State. If he has a good game, we can see him in New York.
Yeah. Even though he has had a career year, this year is the year of the quarterback. It's not too off to say that.
Yeah.
But Michigan, they are looking like a team that will probably be in the playoffs and that could definitely, after the Ohio State Penn State game, you could say that they might be the favorite into the Ohio State game with them both playing opponents that they played each other, and Michigan just looked better in both of those games. But also JJ McCarthy looks like he's a good quarterback, and he was the right pick for Jim Harbaugh to lead this team this year. But next game, I'm ready to talk about. It's a game. Yeah, it's a game that I've been waiting to talk about for a little while. Honestly, I've been waiting to talk about this game for a bit. Arkansas gets their revenge against Auburn. Forgot to put the score on there. My bad. But KJ Jefferson had a great game with 3 total touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 1 passing touchdown, going 16 for 24 for 234 passing yards and 45 rushing yards. He also put a Auburn defender in the dirt on his second rushing touchdown. Actually, his first rushing touchdown as an Arkansas fan, I still don't think that was a touchdown. I don't feel like he broke the plane of the goal line. But hey, who cares? We won. We won pretty handily too, despite what the score says, 41-27. Robbie Ashford had his best game of the season, going 24 for 33 with 285 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 87 rushing touchdowns. But you don't really expect much. A quarterback's going to have his best game of the season going against Arkansas's terrible defense, coming from an Arkansas fan, and we made him look good. Also, let's not forget about Rocket Sanders, who became the fastest player to 1,000 yards in a season in Arkansas history, beating Derek McFadden by 1 week in 8 weeks. He had a 171 rushing game with a 76-yard as his furthest rush of the game. And guess what? We got a revenge from the Bo Nix backward spike. And it's the first time we've won in Auburn since 2012, if I'm not mistaken. The first time we beat them since 2015. So, hey, Sam Pittman has changed his team from the beginning of the season, where we were just losing games that we should have won and not been playing good. But we have a huge game against Liberty, who could be a trap game for us, if you would think, honest. Or technically, they're ranked higher than us. I saw that we're looking outside the AP polls, but with a win against Liberty, we could make it into the polls next week. Well, I don't know if you watched this game at all, but do you have any comments on it?
I did watch this game, and I think Arkansas is kind of playing like the team we thought they were going to be. This start of the season was kind of slow, back-to-back losses with A&M and Alabama, but I think Arkansas is now rebounding nicely, and this game was a good showcase, at least for KJ. And Sanders is, I think, a really top-tier running back. But what this means for Auburn, we'll talk about that at the end of this, because something happened that needs to be discussed. But
Yeah.
Auburn is now 2 losses away from missing out on the bowl game, and I want nothing more than that.
Yeah. Oh, one more thing for this game. Since we're talking about Rocket Sanders, honestly, he has one more year before he can enter a draft. I feel like next year he could be a Heisman on the Heisman watch list, or even just the Doak Walker watch list for next season. Maybe even this season, but I think Blake Corum's probably going to win that. Or what's his name? Connor. Is it Blake Corum?
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. He's probably going to win a Doak Walker, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rockets in it next year. But there was the college game day game of the week that did not turn out to be that close of a game, but it was a great game for Jackson State. Will.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to this game like I thought I was, but probably for the best. It was supposed to be raining out in Jackson, but Jackson State Jaguars, Tigers. Look, alliteration. Tell me some slack.
Yeah, I will.
The number 5 team in the FCS Bowl. They showed out when it came to college game day, beating one of their rivals, Southern University, out of Baton Rouge, steadily 35-0. And there's a good reason why. Shedeur Sanders put up almost 200 yards and a touchdown. So much so they brought in JP John. I'm going to put this Andrade.
Andrade.
Yeah, there we go. He even threw his touchdown on just one attempt.
Yeah.
With Bashawn McCray of Southern only throwing about 85 yards in an interception. Again, I don't know that much about HBCU football, and some of them, being now more deep in the South, something I want to get more invested in, because it's actually entertaining.
Yeah.
Not just on the field, but off the field as well. So, again, I don't really have much to say. Jack State looks good. Dion, second year as a head coach, he's good. He's bringing in those big recruits. And so, yeah, that's all I can really say about this game.
Yeah, technically this is Dion's third year, but it's second technically, because his first season, it was a spring. But Jackson State did look really good. They started off slow again, and I'm pretty sure they had like a 3-and-out or something like that. They had the game did get rained out for a long delay. I think it was like an hour and a half or something like that. But the when the stadium at the beginning of the game, the stadium was packed during the rain and the lightning happened. Shador Sanders did look really good, and also Savion Wilkerson had 96 yards with a touchdown, and he played really well too. And Jackson State's they just they're loaded compared to everyone else in the FCS. I'm pretty sure they have the number one defense in the FCS and the number one or like top five offense in the FCS. I really think they are probably the number one team in the FCS. Too bad they don't play in the playoffs because they have their own bowl. If
Yeah.
they make it, well, most likely they're going to make it to the Celebration Bowl between basically the HBCU championship between the MEAC champions and the SWAC champions. But I would love to see Jackson State in the future play in the playoffs if they could get rid of the Celebration Bowl. But I don't really see that happening because HBCU football is really big on tradition. But Bashawn McCray did not look good at all. Jackson State defense was all over him. And his one interception he threw was to Deion's son, free safety Shiloh Sanders, who had his little marching band. I forgot exactly what it is. Celebration after it. But other than that, Jackson State showed out for their college football game of the week, game day, and it was really fun to see Jackson State perform like this and be featured for ESPN. But we do have something huge to talk about that could have something to do with Jackson State. Well,
Yep, it brings me great disappointment that Auburn University fired head football coach Brian Harsin yesterday. Something I wish they would have kept until the end of the season because I would have loved for the send off to be an absolute thumping in the Iron Bowl. But alas, we will not be getting that. Former NFL running back and Auburn All American Cadillac Williams is going to be taking over control up until the end of the season. So the question I think now remains who is going to get that head coaching job, and a lot of names that's thrown out. I'm going to break down a few of them, and then I'll give you my personal pick. But before I go down that list, I just want to hear what are your thoughts about that, Bryce?
all right. Well, honestly, not surprised. I'm pretty sure I told you we were looking at when JP gave us a little snippet into the Auburn facilities and their program on his episode. You can go click on it. I don't think I might post it on the video, but you can go back and look at his video when he was on. We talked about Auburn's coach being fired, and me and you really been waiting for it. And I feel like we were picking games where he could get fired, and my pick was definitely this game. After this game, I don't really remember yours, but
I said after the Iron Bowl.
oh yeah, well you won an extra Iron Bowl.
Oh, obviously.
But honestly, I get that it was only 2 years. Some people saying it's kind of too early, but he didn't do anything in recruiting, and it's not. We've shown it. History has shown that recruits don't mind coming to Auburn. They've won
Yeah.
national championships. They've beaten Alabama plenty of times. It's Auburn is not the worst spot to go to if you want to be a college football player. They literally have one of the biggest names in sports, Bo Jackson, who attended there. And it seems fine for basketball recruiting where they year on year out get really good basketball recruiting for the past few years since Bruce Pearl's been there. So I really think it's that and him not having good seasons. I feel like if he didn't have good seasons, but he had a good recruiting class or a decent recruiting class coming in or from the past few years, he would still be working there. But it's just one thing about Auburn, they are going to find a reason to get rid of their head coach.
Yeah, before this or after this week, he fell to 9-12 on the year, and he didn't win a single game in October, which is kind of like that red flag. But like you said, Auburn is not that bad of a job. You're in the best football conference. You're probably one of the biggest brands in terms of Under Armour, and you're in pretty much the same competition as Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss in terms of being in one of the best divisions in college football.
Don't forget about Arkansas.
You know what I mean? But I did say Auburn was going to go 4-8, and they're looking to be like that. With 4 games left, they just need to lose 3 more, and we get our wish. But a lot of names have been linked up, and I'm just going to run through a few of them, at least that I've heard of. And then at the end, I'll give you my pick. The names I've heard of obviously are like the up and coming sort of, the Power 5 / Jackson State coaches. Deion Sanders is linked to him. Hugh Freeze, even though he just signed a contract extension last week. I've seen Bill O'Brien. Please, for the love of God, take him away from us. I would love that. I've seen even Lane Kiffin being linked to him now. And
yeah, I did see Lane Kiffin, which is
he's on top of their list. But in my opinion, coming off unbiased of I hate Auburn, and I mean I do, and I want them to pick a horrible coach like they did with Harsin. But if I was Auburn, there is one coach I have in mind who has been doing pretty good. And then surprised he didn't get a big job last year after what he did of being the first group of 5 teams to the playoffs, and that is Luke Fickell of Cincinnati. He is due for a big-time job, and Auburn opening up, I think, is probably the best position he can take. Yes, he could probably stay in that area and go try to get the Wisconsin or Nebraska job, but I think if he wants to win, he wants that SEC money, he's going to Auburn.
Well, let's not forget he did sign a contract at the end of last year. I'm pretty sure he was one of the 10-year contract guys. But
Auburn will give him all the money he wants. I guarantee that.
Yeah, but we've seen how that happens. What happens when that happens? Jimbo Fisher is a prime example of that.
Yep.
I feel like they will either go a young coach who wants to prove something, because it's not like Auburn is like jumping off the page at the moment for a coaching job. I know plenty of people would probably love to join and coach for Auburn, but for me, I don't know. I hadn't really looked into it because it is kind of new. Off the top of my head, dang, who would love this job? Probably like Utah's coach.
Kyle Whittington, I don't think he's going to leave, but
Yeah,
money talks.
just like a team that's been good for the past few years, like NC State coach. I don't really know the coaches' names like that, but like a team that's not in the biggest market, but they are pretty good and has had a good team. But or a defense or a coordinator who's been killing it for one of the top teams. But Lane Kiffin,
Hello, Brian.
yeah, I guess. But Lane Kiffin, don't see him leaving. It's literally you're going into the situation you had when you came to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not that bad. Is a pretty good coaching job. That's why Lane Kiffin took it. Oh, because he was actually supposed to come to Arkansas, but we're not going to say anything about that. Literally, he had to deal with Arkansas done. Then took a flight to Ole Miss to take one last meeting, I guess, and left with a job. But other than that, I don't have anything else about Brian Harsin being fired from Auburn. Will, do you have anything else for us this week?
I wish you could have lasted 4 more games, buddy.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all for watching this week. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the post notification, and see y'all Friday. Will, adios, man.
Deuces.